It gives me much pleasure to be here and indeed welcome this second group that has been brought from the consular and the head of mission from Auckland. As you can see that in the program that there's no specific area that I'm going to talk to you about, but I think what I'd like to do is generally to set the scene in terms of what is happening in Fiji and the various opportunities. You have various other speakers who will speak after me, in particular the Permanent Secretary for Industry and Trade, who will highlight some of the specific areas. But just to tell you what's generally happening in Fiji, as you know that we have elections planned to be held next year, no later than September 30th of next year, which is 2014. We hope to have a new constitution in place by August of this year. We already have, for example, a team that's carried out a various assessment. The report will be out in the next couple of weeks in terms of the capacity building within the elections office in Fiji. Fundamentally, we've had a number of problems with the holding of elections in Fiji previously. If you look at the elections that were held in 2006, the EU Observer Group noted that there were a number of anomalies. Indeed, we had in some of the constituencies a voter turnout of 101%. Obviously, you can't call those sorts of elections credible. But we obviously want to avoid those sorts of issues and to ensure that we do have a very transparent and credible electoral process, not just during the elections, but in the lead up to it and indeed after that. We have a team of experts. Indeed, one of them is from the New Zealand Elections Office, a lady called Melissa Thorpe, together with somebody from the Commonwealth and from the European Union. So those sorts of processes are already in place. And the general message that we have to investors and those people who are interested in Fiji in terms of taking opportunities, taking advantage of the opportunities, is that you need to ride the wave now. It is very, very critical, I think, people to understand that. And just before coming here, I had a meeting, our High Commissioner to New Zealand, High Commissioner Yogesh Karan, had brought over a couple of Indian businesses who are interested in getting to various areas of the economy in Fiji. So there is, nearly on a weekly basis, we have a very strong interest shown by various investors from various parts of the world, including USA, Canada, China, of course, India, Indonesia, and of course Australia and New Zealand, who are very much interested in taking advantage of many of the incentives that have already been put in place by the Bainimarama government. We have the lowest corporate tax regime in the South Pacific. The corporate tax rate is 20%. We have given about 90.5% of all Fijian taxpayers tax cut last year. So in fact we've increased the income threshold that is going to be taxable. It's gone up to 16,000. And the tax rate in fact starts off at 7%. So the idea is to give people more money in their hands, and that is the way to generate economic activity as opposed to having direct fiscal inputs into the generation of the economy. And in fact it's working out quite well because our VAT collection etc. has gone up, and one expects of course with lower corporate tax rates you have less tax evasion, which has been a problem in the past. And we hope to eradicate that, and most textbooks will tell you when you have lower corporate tax rates and personal income tax rates, there's less tax evasion. And that philosophy is actually working quite well. We also have, for example, a corporate tax rate of 17% for any company that sets up the regional or global head office in Fiji, which is very attractive. It's modeled along similar to the Singaporean model, and indeed the New Zealand regional head office is being moved from Melbourne to Suva, and they're in the process of doing that and taking advantage of this corporate tax structure that we do have in place. Apart from that, the general focus in the economy has been very much on, for example, making land available. For those of you who lived in Fiji before would know, for example, that if you leased land for agricultural purposes, you could only lease it up to 30 years. There's a very quirky provision. Now you can lease land up to 99 years. That obviously instills a lot of confidence in investors and people to get into commercial farming which we believe is very much a opportunity that people can venture into, and indeed there's been some very good interest shown in that area. We also have with the land, I mean, land is very important, making that available. You have market rates available, or market rates being paid to the landowners, but at the same time having the longevity of the tenure that's available for people to take it on lease for. On the other hand, but we've carried out a number of reforms, in terms of improving our laws, whether they're socio-economic laws, whether they're in terms of removing various inherent discriminatory provisions that were built into the law. We have also, for example, modernized our criminal act, which is now called the Criminal Acts Decree. We have, the Crimes Decree. We also have in the process of about to launch our new Companies Act, which is modeled very much along the Australian New Zealand models. It's a hybrid of that, and indeed that'll free up a lot of the old practices. So making it a lot more transparent, a lot more accountable, but at the same time a lot easier to be able to form companies. Similarly, we have also carried out a number of reforms in respect of the foreign investor rules. Yesterday, Cabinet approved a number of changes to the regulations where, for example, we used to have minimum investment thresholds in various sectors. If you are a foreign investor and you wanted to invest in those areas, we've removed those thresholds to encourage more foreign investment. But I would encourage most of you, I know, are former Fijians. I would encourage you, if you no longer have your Fijian passports, for you to take up dual citizenship. We've also changed the laws in that respect. In fact, we don't allow dual citizenship, we allow multiple citizenships now. So you can still carry a New Zealand passport and have your Fijian passport. But by having the Fijian passport, you only pay a small fee to get your Fijian passport back. But by having that, it also helps you to not necessarily go through some of the requirements that a foreigner would have to adhere to. For example, getting a foreign investment certificate, etc. So those rules have been changed to make it a lot more easier for people to invest. We've also at the same time brought about a number of substantial investments in Fijian infrastructure. You hear horror stories where, for example, most of you probably would know about the Monosavu Dam. It's built up in the highlands in Netasiri. And so the electricity that used to be provided by Monosavu Dam to the towns and cities, the people who lived along the way, the villagers, the people who owned the land, could only see the electricity lines going over their land and over their villages and on the roof of their houses. They did not benefit from the electricity, even though it was their land that was being used for the electricity. So today we have a program in place where we have a rural electrification program. Now obviously it empowers people. Those people don't need to read under lanterns, and kids don't have to read under lanterns, but it improves the efficiencies. It also means that you can actually go out and do farming. Those people can actually, put their vegetables and dalos, etc., that they want to export in refrigerators or chilling plants, whatever the case may be. We also have a very extensive program in terms of rural water projects. So people get pipe water, people have healthier living. So a number of those projects have been put in place. You'll also be glad to know from a purely New Zealand perspective that with the outsourcing of the maintenance and rehabilitation of our roads, all the three companies that actually won the tender and are looking after roads are Kiwi companies. Fulton Hogan, you've got Higgins, Highway Stabilizers, and another company called Blacktop. So with that opening up of the market, it's allowed obviously New Zealand companies to come in, but at the same time it's driving efficiencies within perhaps the inefficient and bureaucratic approach to governance. We have at the same time a number of incentives available for independent power producers, where we've lifted up the tariff rates that can be payable to them. If you invest, for example, in a renewable energy company, you get a corporate tax rate holiday for 7 years. If you invest in any of those Vanuatu, Lomaiviti, Lau, Kandavu, all those areas are tax-free regions. If you set up a company there, you get a 13-year corporate tax holiday. If you invest in agriculture, even in the other parts of Fiji, you get various concession rates as far as corporate tax is concerned, as far as zero rating or reduced duty on machinery, plant machinery bringing. Indeed, if you want to get into manufacturing, at the moment, for plant and manufacturing equipment is zero rate of duty, because the idea is to provide that impetus for entrepreneurs to expand their existing services or get into new areas. And we already see the difference. We have a massive biscuit factory going up in Lautoka. We have some of the industries that were set up in Ba that have gone into other areas of manufacturing. And I think what you need to also do is not to look at Fiji necessarily as only your market. You need to look at Fiji as the hub and the South Pacific as your market. Papua New Guinea has a population nearly double the size of New Zealand. They don't necessarily have a strong manufacturing base. They don't necessarily have some of the comparative advantages that we have in Fiji. But they of course have a lot of minerals. They have a lot of gold. They have a lot. They just pumped in $15 billion into a gas pipeline. There's numerous opportunities. And with the work that's been done through the ministry, we've been able to now ensure that Papua New Guinea has also complied almost fully with the MSG trade agreement. What does that mean in practical terms? It means that anything you send from Fiji, apart from sugar, salt and tin fish, you'll get zero rate of duty. So there's absolutely no duty charge. And I already know some local companies that were exporting goods to Papua New Guinea or have licenses to export goods are now going to set up a couple more factories just to meet the demand in Papua New Guinea. Nearly 7.9 million people in Papua New Guinea. So there's a huge demand for that. So I think when you're looking at Fiji, you need to look at Fiji, yes, as a market, the second largest populated country in the South Pacific, if you take out Australia and New Zealand. The next one is Papua New Guinea. And already a lot of companies are doing that. Indeed, there's been a lot of demand for Fijian workers to go and work in Fiji. Not just necessarily as tradespeople, but indeed even as professionals in the banking sector, in the finance sector. So there's those opportunities that do exist. I mean, there's a whole plethora of things that I can tell you in terms of what are the incentives that have been put in place. But there are some of the key areas that I've identified that you can look into if you're interested in that. We also have, for example, just by way of infrastructure upgrade, we have outsourced the government ITC center to an Indian company called Yalam in Chile that is in fact upgrading our IT capacity. So we hope to, for example, in the next, within the next year or less than a year, provide a number of online services that you would not have had available. Title searches, company registration, which you take for granted in New Zealand, which has not been happening in Fiji, but we hope to have those in place also. It also means that we're also working on a project by having a national switch system for all the banks to be connected to, as opposed to having their own bilateral arrangements. So if you have a national switch, you can use your card to be able to transact funds between any of the financial institutions, but indeed it gives the opportunity for other institutions such as FNPF, Fiji Sugar Corporation, TLTB, to be able to hook on to this national switch. So it reduces the costs, it reduces the banking fees charges for people who want to access funds through electronically. So ladies and gentlemen, I think what I would, my message to you today would be, and I'd love to take some questions afterwards, because I'm sure you have some questions, but I'm sort of setting the scene. Our focus is essentially on ensuring that the governance structure in Fiji at a philosophical level and a practical level is based on the idea of common and equal citizenry, that we have, as the Prime Minister said on a number of occasions, we want our election to have one person, one vote, one value, the removal of the legal enforcement of ethnic voting, but at the same time create an economic environment where we make it a lot more accessible for the private sector and indeed individuals to do well. But at the same time, we look after our people. We have currently the Commerce Commission that's working on looking at setting a basic minimum wage for Fiji. We need to ensure that the employees of Fiji are looked after. We have, in that vein, we have for the first time in Fiji's history, you will have profit sharing that will be shared by the staff. Fiji Airways, previously Air Pacific, their staff will get a share of the profits in next year's financials, in the end of the next year's financial year. So I think there's a number of opportunities that they are existing there for our people also, and we want to look after them. We want to have a good governance structure. We also at the same time are very, very firm on corruption. We ratified the United Nations Convention Against Corruption. We put ourselves up for the peer review program too, where countries have come and reviewed our performance under UNCAC, or the UN Convention Against Corruption. And indeed, we have been asked recently to go and review another country with another partner, and we did review East Timor in that sense. So there is that adherence to good governance, not just in terms of words, but in terms of practice. We have an independent corruption commission. So if somebody asks you for a bribe, don't give them. That money may have been practiced previously, but we certainly do not adhere to that, because you'll be on the wrong side of the law too. We are, of course, in some of the ministries have become a lot more efficient, a lot more quickly. Some are perhaps less slower than others, and there needs to be some changes in the systems that are following. But we are here to assist you. We have the permanent secretary here, the deputy permanent secretary, the team are here. They'll exchange cards with you at a practical level. They can help you on a day-to-day basis. And we look forward to you, being able to be given the full opportunity to explore whichever area that you're interested in, and for us to give you that level of connectivity that you require at this period of time. So with those few words, ladies and gentlemen, thank you once again for coming to Fiji, and we can assure you that you will find numerous opportunities here, and we look forward to working together with you, and I'm quite happy to take any questions now. Naga, thank you. Thank you. Okay, thanks.